Welcome for those of you that may be here for the first time. We are going through the book of Genesis as we've been doing, and we're nearing in. We're getting to the Genesis. You can kind of break it up into three parts, and so we're sort of at the end, the third stage. Now we're into the people of Israel. Last two chapters was officially the introduction of Israel the man. And now we're going to start to follow the actions of his sons, who are the heads of what will become the tribes of Israel. So everything after this and the rest of the Bible is telling the story of Israel as a people. And it starts off in this chapter. It doesn't start off very well. There's some foreshadowing in this chapter of what's going to be sort of the norm in many ways for a lot of Israel's history, and including some lessons that we can take from for today. So in chapter 34, Jacob has reunited. In chapter 32, or 33, he reunited with Esau, his feuding brother, and he was expecting conflict, he was expecting danger, and instead he received total reconciliation with Esau. Esau invited him to come down and stay with him in Edom, and Jacob somewhat politely either declined or led Esau to believe that he would join him, but then changed his mind and didn't. Regardless, Jacob ended up in a place in the land of Canaan called Shechem, where he stayed camped out and basically began to settle in the land with his family. So then we come to chapter 34, and it says, "Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had born to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land." Now, we're getting back to Dinah. Jacob had 12 or 11 sons by this point. He's going to have another one. 11 sons and one daughter. And this is the daughter, Dinah. She's only mentioned in the birth announcement a few chapters earlier, and then now she's mentioned. And the verse starts off saying that Dinah, the daughter of Leah, born Jacob, went out to, if you have the NIV, it says went out to visit the women of the land. Some translations say went out to be seen by the women of the land, and some say went out to meet the women of the land. The verb is the simple Hebrew verb to see, and it can have any of those range of meanings. So that's where your translations are putting in what they think captures the nuance of this situation. But the verb just straight up, it says she went out to see the women of the land. Verse 2, when Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, ruler of that area, saw her, it's a wordplay on, she went out to see or be seen, and now she gets seen. When he saw her, he took her and violated her. Now, verse 2, again, already in this section, we're going to come on a translation issue. Some translations you have say he took her, he lay with her, and he humiliated her. Others say he took her and he raped her. Others say he took her, he lay with her, and some other verb of defiling or humiliation or whatever. There's three things that the text said he did. He saw her, and the verb is to take. Lakak, it means to take. It can mean to take someone as a wife, to take someone as a spouse. It can mean to take some fruit, like Eve did when she saw, she looked, she took. It can have any of these range of meanings. So this text, as it says, three verbs, he saw, he took, and then the third verb is he humiliated. Ana. It's this word that means to humiliate, to humble, to embarrass would be too light. Defile is sort of in that range as well. But it's basically, it has to do with one's honor, with one's standing in the eyes of the community. So the three things that he did, he saw her, he took her to lay with her, which is biblical for to have sex with her, and thus he humiliated or defiled her. The question that interpreters are divided on is this describing rape, or is this describing illicit sexual encounter between unmarried people? And the answer to that is it could be describing either. Grammatically, it could be describing either. But there's reason to believe that rather than rape, in the sense of what we'll read in other parts of Scripture, that this is describing an illicit sexual affair. Deuteronomy will even give laws about what should happen in this circumstance when someone sleeps with an unmarried virgin, sleeps with a woman who's not been pledged to be married with. who he's not already married. There are laws for this thing. So what's going on here, more likely than a forcible rape, is that he saw her, he took her into his, wherever, his tent, his household, whatever, he slept with her, and that was defiling in the ancient culture. One of the reasons that sexual behavior outside of marriage was prohibited or was frowned upon exclusively, even outside of Israel, was because it called into question, one, the integrity of the family, the father and the brother's honor. That was at stake, and that's still the case around the world. But two is it also called into question any future heir that the woman might bear, or any family relationships. It blurred these lines that in this time, in a nomadic, tight-knit family culture, the purity of the family, the integrity of the family, the inheritance of the family, all of these things were of the utmost importance. And so there was no separation of sex as just this recreational activity in the ancient Near East. Sex was how you were married. And if you had sex before you were married or apart from your marriage, you were basically making a marital claim over something that you didn't have the right to make. And so it was seen as a violation of community standards, and it was seen as it was universally denounced, not just in Israel. We see that in the text. However, we get a glimpse into Shechem and his motives or his attitude all throughout this chapter. The very next verse, he says, his heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl. It's really the young maiden. And spoke tenderly to her, or literally spoke to her heart. So you get the sense that this is not like later in the Bible when Amnon rapes his half-sister and Absalom, David's kids, when this happens again. After that incident, as soon as he had finished sleeping with her, he was just like, get out of here. There was this overwhelming hatred and despising. And this is the opposite. You see that Shechem really did want to make Dinah his wife. He was in love with her. The text will later say in a minute, he was infatuated with her. So this wasn't a case of just him going out and exercising power or any of the violence or any of that associated with other instances in Scripture of rape being recorded. This was actually an illicit relationship, and he wanted it to continue. He wanted her as his wife, which is usually not the case in biblical accounts of rape. So that's one of the reasons that scholars say this is more of like a forbidden or illicit relationship rather than forcible rape. But regardless, verse 4, Shechem said to his father Hamor, get me this girl as my wife. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the field with his livestock, so he kept quiet about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob, the father of one clan talking to the father of the other, patriarch to patriarch. This is how you would arrange marriages. This is how he would make it legitimate in the eyes of everyone. Now Jacob's sons had come in from the field. As soon as they heard what had happened, they were filled with grief and fury because Shechem had done a disgraceful thing against Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. The text may say a disgraceful thing in Israel, or it may say against Israel. Same word in Hebrew. If it's against Israel, it means he has done something against Israel, the man. If it's a disgraceful thing in Israel, then that's a later author reflecting back on this incident after Israel has become a nation. They were filled with, okay. He had done a disgraceful thing against Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please, give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. So the proposal that he offers, that Shechem's dad says, is, hey, join with us. Let's be one people. Intermarry with us. If you've been following along in Genesis, you know that's not an option for God's people to intermarry with the Canaanites. So already there's some tension here. Like, this is not a good idea. But the offer that he extends is a gracious one. I mean, from his point of view, intermarry. Let's be one people. Let's not put up these divides between us. let's become one. So there's this desire for peace, there's this desire for safety, a desire to make right. Interestingly, though, he doesn't admit any wrongs in this account. You would expect someone to come in this situation, there would be an admission of guilt and a restitution of some type, either payment or something to do with the family's honor. But there's none of that. There's sort of this glossing over of this whole incident that happened to Dinah on the part of Shechem and on the part of Hamor. We'll see later on the part of all the other guys in her family. But Hamor said to them, my son has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him with his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters. Take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Verse 11, then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the girl as my wife. So he is just flat out saying whatever it takes. He is in love with this girl, and he's willing to do anything. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. Jacob's sons replied deceitfully. This pattern that's been throughout Jacob's life is continuing. Even though he's Israel, even though he's got a new identity, the old Jacob of 60-something years is still, there's ramifications for that behavior. Like father, like sons. They are, the old Jacob's reputation is being relived in his sons at this point. They replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem. They said to them, we can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who's not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will give our consent to you on one condition only. You become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we will take our sister and go. So this is the prohibition. They're saying, we are a covenant community, and you have to join our covenant community by being circumcised. Now, what they're saying is not wrong. If the Shechemites had agreed to this and willfully entered into this covenant community with Israel, had taken upon themselves circumcision and accepted the covenant between Israel and God, that would have been fine. There's no prohibition in Scripture against interracial marriage. The prohibition is against interreligious marriage. And throughout the Bible, whenever someone wants to become one with Israel and is willing to enter into a relationship with the God of Israel, that's totally allowed. There's whole books of the Bible named after people that did just that. You read the book of Ruth. She was a Moabite. Moabites were cursed. They were said to be apart from the assembly of God. Yet she entered into a covenant relationship with Israel through marriage. There's nothing wrong with that. The Bible never prohibits interracial marriage, family marriage, none of that. The reason it prohibited Canaanite marriage is because the Canaanites were idolatrous. And the Canaanites were exceedingly wicked, and they were only getting worse. And so there was a prohibition that God put in place for them. But any Canaanite who converted or who accepted the God of Israel was no longer a Canaanite. You remember a lady named Rahab. You read about her in Joshua. She was a Canaanite. She converted. She recognized and accepted the God of Israel. So the proposal that they made could have been totally legitimate, totally valid. And it seems like, okay, well, that's actually not a bad idea. Verse 18, their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem, the young man who was most honored of all his father's household, and who was the chief over all of the people in that area. He lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. And that verb can also be translated, he was infatuated with Jacob's daughter. He was head over heels. Fellas, you would have to be head over heels as an adult male to circumcise yourself for the possibility of marrying this woman. Ladies, you know what circumcision is. You can understand he was definitely head over heels. It's not a surgery that's done on adults because it's incredibly painful. And in the ancient world, actually, circumcision was practiced outside of Israel. Israel was not the only group that practiced circumcision. Canaanites and Philistines were noted because they didn't. practiced circumcision. But Egyptians and Hittites, all of these people around him, they all practiced circumcision. Difference was Israel did it when the child was 8 days old as a sign of the covenant community. Other peoples did it when the child was becoming a man as this test of manhood, or this rite of passage, or this painful thing to endure to enter into manhood. So it wasn't unknown. It's not like the men would have been like, you want us to cut off? What? That's crazy. What? We've never heard of that. No, they knew about it. So it wouldn't be a ridiculous, totally crazy suggestion. But at the same time, it would have been a pretty serious one. You know, like this is pre-anesthesia and pre-robotics. There's no Neosporin in the ancient world, so it's pretty dangerous to undertake any type of surgery. So, verse 20. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to their fellow townsmen. Why'd they go to the gate? We talked about that a few weeks ago, because the gate is where business takes place in the ancient cities. The gate was City Hall. It was the courthouse. It was the justice of the peace. It was the town hall. It was all of that. So Hamor said to his son, went to the gate of the city, speak to their fellow. Verse 21. These men are friendly towards us. Irony. They said, let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will consent to live with us as one people, only on the condition that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all other animals become ours? So let's give our consent to them, and they will settle among us. All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. How did Shechem pitch this to his townspeople? It's an economic opportunity, fellas. Get in on the ground floor here. You want to be part of this. We can have all of their land, or their livestock, their animals. They're exceedingly rich. Jacob is exceedingly rich. And so they see this as, this is a gold mine. You know, let's do this. No mention of the relationship, no mention of the real reason why Shechem wants this to happen. He wants it to happen so he can marry the woman that he's infatuated with. Leaves that out completely. So there's deceit upon deceit in this chapter. It's like everyone in this chapter is acting shady in some way, shape, or form, except Dinah. So, all the men of the city agreed. Verse 25. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, and that would be the case. On the third day, that's when, most likely fever would have set in. That's when the pain would be the most severe in the ancient world. That's when you would not even be thinking about doing any type of movement, any type of anything but laying in bed. You don't want anything to cause any blood to flow in regions that are still tender. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, that's his second and his third-born son, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. This is a brutal and grim irony of what the Shechemites had wanted. What did they say? All of their possessions will be ours. And now, actually, it's the opposite. Everything of theirs is taken, including their wives. Verse 30. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi. Now Jacob speaks. He's been silent the whole time, by the way. So we don't know if he was in on this plan. We don't know. Maybe he thought, okay, they're going to go get revenge. Maybe it'll just be on Shechem and Hamor. But it didn't see all of the violence that would come about. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people living in this land. We're few in number. If they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. Verse 31, but they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? End of section. This section ends with a rhetorical question, and a lot of questions in it that are left unanswered. At no point in this do we get the view of God. At no point in this do we get any consulting with the Lord. At no point in this is there any mention of Dinah and what she's going through. She's almost seen as just kind of the catalyst for this event. But what you do see is a desire for greed. A desire for goods, a greed, deceit, responded to with deceit. You get just this whole mess of relationships between Israel's sons and the sons of the Canaanites in the land. And it presents us, it does what Scripture is going to do throughout. The Bible does not give us fables. You've ever read Aesop's fables? They're all these little stories, and each one is to teach a particular lesson. And you tell the story, and then, oh, okay, that's the lesson we should get from the story. The Bible doesn't do that. It doesn't give fables, and despite how you were taught it in Sunday school, and I say this because I was taught it this way in Sunday school, each Bible story is not a self-contained fable. There's not always a neat lesson. There's not always a resolution. There's not always a moral of the story. What you have is an unfolding of the history of Israel, an unfolding of the people of God and their covenant relationship with Him, with all of their warts, with all of their blemishes, with all of their failings, and you're left with these accounts that raise more questions than they answer. And that's part of what's intended. It's intended to get you to think through this account. Who was in the right? Who was acting nobly? Who was acting deceitfully? What did Jacob's sons do that were correct? What did they do that were crimes? What did Shechem and Hamor do that was correct? What did they do that was abomination? These are the questions that would have circulated to the ancient reader. And we see later in Scripture, when Jacob is on his deathbed and he's going to pronounce a prophecy or a blessing over all of his sons, he specifically denounces Simeon and Levi, specifically for this incident and for their violence. And he describes them as violent and having this bloodlust. And you see in this section that's characteristic of at least of Simeon and Levi in this section. They would have been within their rights to attack and kill Shechem, and even maybe Hamor, because you would take responsibility for the action of your sons. And in the ancient Near East, that would not have been this big crime if they'd done that. It might have caused a clan battle, it might have caused a feud, it might have led to war. But in the eyes of the peoples, that would have been acceptable, because they were defending the honor of their sister who had been violated, which was an attack on the integrity of their whole family. And as a result, the whole people of Israel. So that could have been understandable, even if it wouldn't have been God's ideal, even if it wouldn't have been His desire, it could have at least been understandable. But to go the whole distance of killing everyone, all the men, all the fighting men, the ones who died, to killing all of the able-bodied fighting men in the city, and don't think of a city like Charlotte. The city, we're talking like a village with walls around it. So maybe a couple of dozen tops. But to go and do that is such a tremendous amount of overkill. It's so disproportionate to what happened. And that's something that you'll see throughout the ancient world is whenever there be conflicts, there's a reason that later in Scripture God will institute this practice called the lex talionis, an eye for an eye. We read that as New Testament Christians and we think, oh, that's so barbaric, an eye for an eye. You know, oh, you killed me, so I'm going to kill you. You gouged out my eyes, and I'm going to gouge out yours. The reason that law was given, or will be given in Israel, is precisely to prevent things like this. The eye for an eye rule in the Old Testament was to prevent escalation of violence. Because in the ancient Near East, it was, you damage my eye, I kill your family. Right? You kill my father, I wipe out your entire people. I mean, that was how it was done back in the day, even within Israel. And so God institutes, He's going to institute His people this saying, the punishment has to fit the crime. If someone kills, only they can be killed in response, not their family, not other people. And so that was to put in place for any godly society this level of retaliation can never exceed the offense. Because otherwise, what do you end up with? You end up with exactly what we're seeing in the newspapers today with Israel and Gaza and all these wars going on. One side sends some rockets over. We're going to bomb your village. We're going to send more rockets over. We're going to bomb the whole neighborhood. And it just keeps going worse and worse and worse. So you see echoes of this even today among countries, particularly Israel, but also elsewhere around the world. This chapter just leaves us to reflect on that. The end question that they ask, Jacob's mad. And even Jacob's anger isn't really all that righteous. He's just angry about, hey, look what you're doing to us. They're going to wipe us out now. Or all these people are going to hate us. It's not hey, what you did was wrong. What you did was deceitful. What you did was unacceptable. So even in Jacob, he's just concerned for his own national security, so to speak, because the nation of Israel is his family right now. There's just this concern for me, looking out for me, looking out for, and his brothers, well, our family honor. We're looking out for that. And, the concerns in this are very, very secular, very worldly, very not in line with the purpose for what God has called Israel to be. What has God called Israel to be? A light to the nations. A way of reaching these people groups, including these Shechemites, and drawing them to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob. And instead of that, when there's even a chance for that to happen, all of a sudden, Israel itself is undermining the efforts that could have been there by deceiving, luring in, and then destroying. Instead of being a light to the nations, instead of showing the grace and the mercy that God has shown Israel in his entire life thus far, instead of showing that to these people who were willing to, okay, let's see what happens here. Their motives may not have been perfect. Israel's motives may not have been perfect, but the outcome was a disaster for everybody. And so that's what we're left with in this section. And Israel, immediately in the next chapter, Jacob's going to leave. He's going to go to Bethel, where he should have gone in the first place, where God had told him to go. Not go to Shechem, not go to any of the places. Go to Bethel. He's finally going to return there. And you'll see that things are going to start to get somewhat back on track. But there's already this ominous detour that the people of God are taking. And it won't go unpunished. Levi and Simeon will pay the price for it on their father's deathbed. So, there's your happy lunchtime Bible study for the day. Possible illicit sexual encounters, rape, circumcision, slaughter, all in a good day's Bible study here on Rich Chris. We've got some more food if you want some seconds. Other than that, we are right on time. So have a great day. Take care.